Exodus 3, 1 through 7. It reads, Now Moses was keeping the flock of his father-in-law, Jethro, the priest of Midian, and he led his flock to the west side of the wilderness and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. And the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a flame of fire out of the midst of a bush. He looked, and behold, the bush was burning, yet it was not consumed. And Moses said, I would turn aside to see this great sight, why the bush is not being burned. When the Lord saw that he turned aside to see, God called to him out of the bush, Moses, Moses. And he said, Here I am. Then he said, Do not come near. And the God of Jacob. And Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look at God. Then the Lord said, I have surely seen the affliction of my people who are in Egypt, and have heard their cry because of their taskmasters. I know their sufferings. After verse 7, it continues telling why Moses is there, why God is meeting him. I'm not going to continue reading it. The point is the fact that God wanted him there to tell him this. But I have a question. What happened to the sheep? In verse 1, it mentions that he's keeping a flock. He has sheep. Never mentions it ever again. I mention this because the Bible talks about sheep all the time. Talks about sheep that you cannot leave them behind, or, well, they're going to walk away. They're going to wander. They're like a toddler. They're gone. What happened to these sheep? They're not even Moses' sheep. They're his father-in-law's sheep. And, well, something caught Moses' eye, and he walked away from the sheep. Well, Moses was not amateur at this. He knew what he was doing. Well, this moment in time, something was more important than the sheep. Even after all this, when Moses goes back to his father-in-law, the Bible still does not talk about the sheep. I'm sure somewhere when it actually happened, sheep were mentioned. Sheep were there. But the Bible does not care to tell us about it. If my father-in-law wanted me to watch something of his, something very important, or I don't know, his livelihood, and I walked away from it because I saw something shiny, I better have a really good reason to tell him what I just did. And probably the only reason that he would accept is, well, the shiny object was God. That's about the only thing that he would accept. And probably a priest of Midian would be about the same way. Moses talks to his father-in-law, hey, what happened to the sheep? Well, I saw this shiny object. And you left for the sheep? Well, the shiny object was God. Okay, then that's okay. When Moses saw the fire in the middle of the bush from afar, he knew something special was happening. It was probably not the first fire he had seen tending the sheep. He is out in the middle of nowhere, in a desert somewhere. He's probably seen some fires. The question is, how long did he have to look at that fire in the middle of the bush to know to go to it? Then he just left the sheep unattended to go look at the fire. Even if this was just an anomaly, he had to know it was special. He had to know it was a God thing, for he left everything behind. The sheep was his livelihood, just for a closer look of this fire. And nothing stopped God from just coming to Moses. He could have. He did for other people in the Bible. But for Moses, at this particular time, he did not. I don't know why, but I do know that the fire in the middle of the bush was an invitation. Moses had to be willing to answer the invitation and aware that the invitation existed. But the answer to the invitation is not always easy. What if Moses never actually looked at the fire? What if he saw it and never paid too close attention to it and just walked away with the sheep? He didn't. He saw it, paid attention, knew exactly what it was, and guided to it. Moses came to the mountain of God, Horeb. It is debated what mountain this is. Some think it might be Mount Sinai, but we have no proof of that. Some think that this was just a mountain range, but we still don't have any proof of that. We have no idea what mountain this is. And it was a mountain of God simply because that is where God chose to meet with one of his children. And God's presence was there. Whatever mountain that is today, it is just a mountain. Just like all the other mountains, all spoken into existence by the God or set in motion to form, unless God goes to that mountain to meet with one of his children. But there's something significant about this mountain nonetheless. The name, Horeb. It means desert or desolate. Moses came to the mountain of God, to the middle of nowhere. Moses was almost always in the middle of nowhere, but the Bible made sure we knew he was in this case. God will meet us anywhere, at any time. Then Moses saw a fire, and he went to see it, to see why the bush was not being burnt up. God sent the invitation and then waited. What did Moses not respond in the middle of nowhere? But he did respond. And God called out to Moses only when he got to the bush. And all God said was, Moses, Moses. No plan, no direction. God just called out Moses, Moses. He called out the name of his child. And it was Moses' job to respond. And Moses could have responded in any way. He could have ran away after hearing his name. I still don't even know what the sheep are doing at this time. He could have went back to them. Maybe God's watching them. I don't know. And he could have just focused on anything else, but he didn't. He responded. He said something back. When he heard his name, he responded the best way possible. He said, "Here I am." This is more than just saying that he is present. This is not a roll call. God doesn't simply ask for a roll call. He requires participation. And when he says, "Here I am," it means a lot more. It implies something so much better. Moses knew he was talking to God. He knew God was about to ask him to do something. It was just not a social visit, even though Moses and God had some of those. This was not it. Moses was ready to answer in a certain way. Here I am. He is saying, I am ready to say yes, no matter what you ask. You invited me. I came. Here I am. I am ready to say yes before you even ask. When I was working on this, my working title was Before God Even Asks. And Moses, more or less, continues to say, all you have to do is to ask me, and I am there. I am ready if you say so. Here I am. And after Moses tells him, stop, take off your shoes, God tells Moses that it is holy ground. But what does that mean? It does not necessarily mean sacred. Maybe, but it could. But many times when God says something is holy, he is saying that it is separated. It is set apart because of God's presence. That's why we are holy, because we are separated. We are set apart for God's presence. But why take off his shoes? Maybe the shoes represent human flaws since they are man-made. And he just wanted his creation to touch the land with his presence. Or also, taking off shoes shows reverence and all this great awe of who you are with. Or maybe the answer is something simple. Moses was in the middle of nowhere, standing on a mountain. And if when Moses takes off his shoes, he is saying, I have nowhere to be but right here with you, God. Moses left behind the sheep to look anything you ask, and I will be there. Then God makes sure Moses cannot go anywhere. If this happened today, he might ask for something other than shoes, because many people will just go without them anyway. Lack of shoes would not stop many people. Probably wouldn't stop me. But some of us, well, he might ask for our wallet, our car keys, our phone, and for me, pens, because I feel lost without having a pen in my pocket. I don't even use it half the time. I just have to have it. Well, if God asks for those, you can't go very far. Now Moses is stuck on this mountain with God. It is just Moses and God. No sheep, no shoes, and no turning back. That's my current title. No sheep, no shoes, no turning back. I'm here, God. What do you want me to do? It is yours. First, make sure you can't leave. You left your livelihood to come to see me. Make sure you can't go back. Then Moses, I will tell you what I want. Then God told Moses everything he needed to know. I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. And that's all it took for Moses to feel the awe. At this point, he hid his face because he was afraid to look at God. He knew it was God to begin with. But that, in God's voice, it just took him by awe. Have you ever had that moment where you're just talking to God and he says one thing that puts your awe for him the next level, one extra step, one you did not prepare for? So you don't know what to do and you're just sitting there broken, but broken in a good way. And that is Moses right here. Then as Moses stands there broken, shoeless, God gets to the point. Remember, Moses, your people, the one you ran away from, the one being oppressed by Egypt, well, you're going back. And you will lead them out of Egypt. And I chose you to go to the most powerful man in the world, one who thinks he's a god, and make this demand. In his conversation with God, Moses never said no. He questioned God, not because he didn't believe him, but he was trying to comprehend what was going on. He just left his sheep in the middle of nowhere, followed fire, took off his shoes, and now God is telling him to go argue against the most powerful man in the world. That's pretty confusing. Moses was happily leading the sheep in the middle of nowhere. And now God is asking him something completely different, something he did not realize that he was prepared for. Moses was afraid that his humanness was going to get in the way and mess everything up. Little did Moses know that he was going to have to lead a different type of sheep out in the middle of nowhere. It is interesting how God invited Moses in a fire. The Bible tells us that Moses got his name because he was drawn out of water. From the Hebrew word mashah, his name is associated with water. So what does God do when he invites Moses to him? Let's use fire. I am a firm believer that our names are important. I believe our names are a part of our personality, and they are who we are, whether we know it or not. The Bible implies this. That's why sometimes God changed their name. And that's why the meanings of my sons' names are God is helping me and God is my power or my strength. I understand the reason why Moses' name is linked to water, for he was literally poured out of it. But why did God call him in a way that seems so opposite than who Moses was? 3 words. Here am I, or here I am. Moses was willing to do whatever God asked. That did not start after he saw the fire. He already had that. He might have been working on that for years. That is why he was lured to the fire. That's why he noticed it. He was ready to tell God, here I am. Before you even ask, Lord, I am willing. Speaking of names, have you noticed that Moses' father-in-law name kept on changing? Every time his wife is the same, it's the same wife, same father-in-law, but his father-in-law's name is not the same. Well, some people have no idea what's going on there, and I don't know all of it. But I do know the names that his father-in-law is mentioned as. He is first introduced as Reuel, and then Jethro, then Hobab. When he is first introduced as Reuel, it means friend from killing an Egyptian. And Moses is seen as an Egyptian. He needed the comfort of God, and now he found a friend of God. And you can tell that Moses had a close relationship with his father-in-law. He trusted him for advice, and we always saw him go to him. The last name we see, I'm skipping the second for now. The last name we see for his father-in-law is Hobab. Hobab means favored or beloved. That is the name that is used for him in Judges, a book that Moses did not write. But Moses is accredited to writing the Pentateuch, the first 5 books in the Bible. and he writes a lot about his father-in-law. And he used two of these names, Reuel and Jethro. Moses used Jethro in this case, in the passage that we read tonight. And Jethro means overflow or more than enough. To describe someone with many names or titles, you pick the one most appropriate for that time, especially the Bible does a very good job at that. So why pick Jethro at this time? Here I am. Moses has realized that he has more than enough. He went towards God and left behind the sheep because he had more than enough. He left everything behind because he had more than enough. He was willing to say, "Here I am," because he had more than enough. He had decided that he was willing to say yes to God before he even asked. All because Moses had more than enough. Moses needed a friend of God when he ran away from Egypt. But during the time from running away from Egypt to here, Moses himself became a friend of God. Now he has more than enough. Here I am, Lord. I have more than enough in you. Before you ask, I am willing to say yes. I have a question for all of us. Do we have more than enough? If we do, how often are we telling God, "Here I am"? Are we willing to say yes before he even asks? Well, here is your invitation. Here's my invitation from God. Are we going to answer it? This is our burning bush. Or instead of answering it, are we just going to stay behind with the sheep? And when God says your name, will you answer with, "Here I am"? And if God tells you to stay and prove it, how will you respond? Could we stand? How will we respond? How will we respond when he comes to us, says our name? We put everything behind, take our shoes off, takes the part, let us stay here in his presence. How will we respond? Let us respond.